somebody's lawn. God knows where he got it. I have no idea. So we were looking at this thing and we're thinking, oh boy, we're going to have to let him in to our exclusive, like the Dead Poets Society, our exclusive society. And actually we ended up liking this person a lot. You know how young people are. They're not sure they like somebody until they know them. We didn't know what to do with this thing. Mrs. Braden came home and she had a fit when she saw this thing in her backyard. She said, do something with that. Well, at night what we did was, I haven't thought about this in years. We brought it over to St. George's Church and we put it on the lawn. And of course, I'm not sure we actually put it on the lawn. We put it right by the front door. It was in the middle of the night we did this. Father Kirby, the next day saw it there, and I thought he was going to bust a gut. And of course, Mrs. Braden owned up to it. And of course, we all were reprimanded. We all had our hands. It wasn't nasty. It was just not very nice. But we wanted to do something. You know how kids are. We wanted to do something. I'm not sure where it ended up. We got rid of it somehow. We had to get rid of it. But it was the same thing with the Bellevue Fruit Garden up on the corner. They took their old sign down from the Bellevue Fruit Garden. It was huge. It was where Stewart's was. It was called the Bellevue Fruit Garden. And everybody used to go there and buy fruit and vegetables and stuff. Well, they took their sign down because they had to fix the brackets. Well, we thought they were throwing it out, so we took the sign. And we brought it into the stockade. And again, we brought it in Mrs. Sykes' apartment. We put it along the wall. It was a big sign. It was probably 10 feet long. It was huge. We carried that damn thing down from the Bellevue Fruit Garden, and we put it in her living room. I thought she was going to have a fit when she saw the thing. Well, we had to go back and eat humble pie and return the sign. We thought they were throwing it out. We didn't think they were just going to fix the sign. We thought, well, they're going to put up a new sign. So we used to do stuff like that. And of course, we'd always end up in the Harlow's pool. And of course, they always had, like, you couldn't swim after a certain time, but that never made any difference to us. We would jump in there at night, and Mr. Harlow would come out with a flashlight. Arr, 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 who's in the pool? Who's in the pool? So we used to yell who we were, and he knew we were neighborhood people, so he never said much to us. But I remember I went to school with the Harlow twins and Priscilla, and we sort of became friends. And we sort of, you lose touch, and then you become friends again when you're older. And the kids, and Brad Harlow was the brother. I became really good friends with him because he was very much interested in theater. There was a young man I remember that used to swim in the Harlow's pool. He lived down on Washington Avenue. I wish I could remember his name, but he drowned, but not in the Harlow's pool. He drowned up at Lake George. But he was a great swimmer. I think he was really involved in swimming, and he was doing something in the lake up there and passed away. And it really hit a lot of people very hard, but I can't remember his name. Isn't that awful? He lived down on Washington Avenue, though. But it's always been a very interesting neighborhood. I live in a house on North Ferry Street now, 27 North Ferry Street, which was owned by the Van de Bogarts, which was Van de Bogart, Fibus and Schmidt. He was an architect. He wrote a book called Doors Without Walls, which I have a couple of copies of. And he also they were very much involved with the creation of the stockade. Well, I used to play in that house. When I say play, games, not play as a child, but play like Scrabble. And his son, they had 3 boys, and Franz was one that graduated with me, Franz Van de Bogart. He was very, very bright. I think he was like valedictorian of our class. But I used to beat him at chess, which was a great ego booster for me because this kid was like beyond description. He was so smart. But we used to sit upstairs in his bedroom and play chess for hours. And that house had a big window in the front of it. I remember when I bought like a picture window, which everybody in the neighborhood hated. And it had a picture window on the side. And back in it's been like 20 years now I've had the house. I used to own a house over at 224 Union Street, which I sold. It was a brownstone. And then I went into an apartment for a while on Washington Avenue, and I said, I'm not going to move out of this apartment until I find a house that I want. And a friend of mine who owned quite a bit of property down here, Ron Chard, called me and he said, Mary Van de Bogart wants to sell her house. She's like 95. And I said, are you serious? He said, go on over there and you offer her a price for that house. You go buy that house. And I thought, that is something that I've always I've really liked that house. It's just a wonderful little house. Well, I say little, it's not that little, but it's a wonderful house. So I went over there and Mary was thrilled that I knocked on her door and we came to terms with a price, and She actually, the kids, and I thought one of the boys would want it, but one went to Seattle, the other one went to Chicago, and one went somewhere else. I'm not sure where, but I know I talked to the Giles, the one that was in Seattle, and we worked out a deal where I could buy the house, and I did, and it was, it's a wonderful house. But it was so interesting because it didn't have one closet in it, and I never even paid attention to that when I bought the house. And it was in quite, she never really did much to the house over, she owned it for like 65 or 75 years. There was, yeah, they were there forever. What? It's, well, it's very interesting. Susan Staffa says the first floor is very early, like somewhere around 1703. It was like a barn. The second floor, it's actually, the plaque says 1795 was when they made it into a house. And when I gutted the house inside, and if you look at the construction of the first floor, it's all post and beam construction. It's very much like a barn inside the first floor. It's got all barn wood and hand hewn. The second floor, you can tell, is later, much later, probably, like I said, 1795. You can tell by the wood the way it was built. But I've completely restored the house, and I've got it all open on the first floor. You can see all the post and beam construction. And took out the picture window, which the neighborhood was thrilled with, and took out the window on the side and redid that, and have spent a lot of time and money doing it. But it's worth it. My mother, when I bought the house, I was in there, and it was you'd light a match and the wind would blow through the wall and blow the match out, especially this time of year. My mother walked in and said, "Are you crazy? Are you out of your mind?" And I said, "You know, I really like this house. What's to like about it?" She couldn't figure it out at all. But she kind of turned around after I got the kitchen in and did a little bit more work on it. But it's a great neighborhood to live in, because one of the things that I found is very interesting, and I tell people, I sell houses too. I'm a real estate agent. I've been in every single house practically in the Stockade. I've sold over 300 properties, some of them 3 and 4 times. It's a very, I tell people when they move in, if you want to get involved, people will welcome you, and they will certainly want you to get involved. And if you don't, nobody will bother you. It's just the way it is, you know, which is nice. It's a real city kind of living experience, which I really enjoy. I don't think I could live in Clifton Park or Niskayuna, which are great places to live and everything, but they're not. It's not the same when you live in a city. It's very inclusive. We have all kinds of people. We have on our street, we have millionaires, we have average people, we have people who wait on tables, and we have people who are Broadway producers. So it's a very interesting area to live in. John Sayles bought a house around the corner just recently. He's a movie producer, if you probably know that. And, you know, we have down the street, we have people that collect art. We have another Broadway producer down the street from me. But other than that, we have a lot of very average people, Union College professors, school teachers, nurses, doctors. It's just a real city neighborhood, which is great. And of course, we're bordered by the park, which is really nice. I used to spend a lot of time down there as a kid. In fact, I'll tell you, I've just thought of a very interesting story. I have a scar here, right here on my forehead. And if you've ever heard of a race car driver named Cha-Cha Muldowney, she became very, very famous. There's a movie called Heart Like a Wheel. Bonnie Bedelia played the lead. It's the story of her life. She was from Schenectady. She was the first female race car driver in the United States, and she started in Fonda. Her name was Shirley Rock. She lived across the street from me, and I was madly in love with her when I was 6 and 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, whatever it was, 10 years old. And down at the park, at Riverside Park, there was a pool. There was it was a second level pool. So the building had these wonderful stone arches, and upstairs, you'd go up the stairs and the pool was up on top. So we used to swim there from the day nursery school I went to over on Liberty Street. I went to a day, my mother used to drop me off in the morning because my mother went to work, and then I'd stay at the day nursery school. So I must have been rather young, probably 8 years old, maybe somewhere in that range. Of course, Shirley and I were like really together. We really liked each other. I don't even know if she'd remember me now. But we used to play, we were like attached. And we made these hatchets out of stone, and we were Indians. We were playing cowboys and Indians. Well, we were upstairs at the pool, and I was chasing her, and I guess that's normal when you're young, right? So I was coming down the stairs, and if there's these stone arches, the building was all arched, and she ran around the corner, and I ran around the corner. She ran through the arch, and I was so fixed on her, I ran right into the stone wall, and I cracked my head open. And I remember this, I can't remember a lot, but I remember this very clearly. I fell backwards and, of course, passed out, and they had to get the ambulance, and they didn't have to do any stitches, but it bled like hell, pardon the French. And that's my scar, and there's a little bump there from Shirley Rock, who became Cha-Cha Muldowney, who became very, very famous and still is among the race car drivers of the world. She was the first one to, look her up. She's a very interesting lady. But they did make a movie on her life, and she was from Schenectady. She married a fella her name Shirley Rock. I've still got her picture at home somewhere. I'm sure I could find it if I had to. And she had pigtails, and I just was in love with the girls that had pigtails. So, and the interesting thing was the day nursery school was on Liberty Street, right next to Ottaviano's tailor shop. Joya Taviano, I don't know if you know Joya. She's a big patron of Proctor's in here, and they just gave her a patroon. We had a big party here at the theater for her. They made her a patroon. Her dad owned the tailor shop, and then my grandfather owned the shop next door, which was a shoe repair shop on Liberty Street. So, and I remember Joya's father. I remember him very clearly. He died in a very tragic accident when she was quite young, actually. And then also connected to me, which I think you've interviewed, is Mary Mara. She's like 96 or something. And I introduced her at the Christmas affair we have here every year in the Stockade. And before I introduced her, she said, "Just remember, Joe, I used to change your diapers." And I'm thinking, oh my God. So when I made the little announcement, I said, "Mary Mara," she tells me she used to change my diapers. God knows she must be 150 because I'm 100. And so she gave me hell afterwards, saying, "How dare you tell them how old I am?" I said, "Mary, they know how old you are. It was in the paper." Well, she had a relative, and I think he was our cousin, who had a barber shop on South Ferry Street, and it was where, it's a little house right now. She's an artist. Jessica, right next to, there's Slick's Tavern, then there's an apartment building. That was Sam Hankins Confectionery, and my mother worked there in the 1920s, of course, way before I was born. And then next door was the barber shop, was Hank Bosey, who was related to Mary Marr. I think they were either cousins or something. And then there was a little old lady that was brought from Italy that lived in the back, and her name was Molly. And my grandfather, we used to bring Molly wood because she was, in those days, back in the 40s, you heated with wood if you didn't have a furnace, and this place didn't have a furnace. So we used to bring Molly wood, and I was always scared of her because she was always in black. A terrible thing to say, but she looked like a witch to me. I didn't know what, So my grandfather used to grab me to carry the wood. I was very young, and we used to bring the wood in the back there down the alley and bring the wood to Molly, and she always used to give us a loaf of bread for doing that. And of course, we always stopped at Pareca's to get bread every day. We used to go down there every single day to get bread. And then we always buy an extra loaf to eat on the way home. And of course, there was the farmer's market on Broadway. But Schenectady was quite active when I was a kid. You couldn't walk on the sidewalks if you were small. I used to walk right alongside when I used to go downtown on the curb, or actually in the street, because it was a busy, busy place when I was young. We used to say you never went anywhere between 3 and 6 in Schenectady, because when GE let out and the Alco let out, the streets were tied up to the point where you really couldn't go anywhere. You really couldn't go anywhere. But it was a very active city at one time, and of course it's coming back now with all of the new construction and things that have been happening here. I'm partners with a fellow who owns over 100 apartments in the Stockade, and I do a lot of rentals, and we have a lot of nice medium high-end rentals, and a lot of new people have been moving in over the years. Other than that,
Stockade, you talk about how busy Schenectady was, the Stockade itself had a lot of businesses.
Well, the Stockade was, back when I was young, was not really very much. It started with, obviously, Warner and Jim, and Van de Bogart started the Stockade Association to try to save the neighborhood. When I was young, it was considered a real low-end kind of slum almost, in a sense. It was not like it is today. The buildings were really not taken care of. They had torn down so many. I remember many buildings they tore down. Behind the Stockade Inn, there was a fabulous building that I believe was where the Historic Society was originally, and it had these wonderful pointed windows, I remember. That building came down to create a parking lot for it wasn't the Stockade Inn then, it was the lower club, which we would call the Mohawk Club. But there was the lower club, and then there was the upper club in Schenectady, which I actually worked at the upper club when I was very young. So they tore down that building, and then across the street they've created many parking lots in the area. So they have torn down a lot of buildings, and I think what happened was, and you probably already have this on tape, they saw this happening, and they had a great vision. And they said, we've got to stop them tearing down everything. If Liberty Street, when I was a kid, was all row houses, and if you went up to the end of Liberty, when you got to Erie Boulevard, there was the Erie Theater, and then there was the State Theater, and then across the street was this fabulous train station, which was like a miniature Grand Central Station. It was huge. It was beautiful. And I used to go to the movies, to the Erie Theater. That was actually a vaudeville house. It had 4 balconies. And then the State Theater, I believe, was built as a movie theater, but Proctor's was a vaudeville theater. And then, of course, there was a plaza up on top of the hill, which was the last big house built in the United States. It was built in '39, I believe. But anyway, getting back to the Stockade, all the row houses on Liberty Street, which actually is part of the Stockade area, those are all gone. There's only one house over there now on Liberty Street, and that's where all the actors used to stay. They were all sort of boarding houses for all the vaudeville teams that used to. And I do have a vague recollection of vaudeville. I remember seeing vaudeville, and of course my father was in the business too. He was in the theater business, and he was a very active musician, so he played a lot of the shows. So I used to get to meet a lot of these people. I never was quite sure who they were because I don't remember now, but he worked with Buddy Holly. He worked with Bill Haley and his Comets, and a lot of the early rock and roll people. He was involved with Alan Freed, which is a very interesting individual. He's the one who actually started rock and roll, not Dick Clark, but he was the founder of rock and roll and started in the United States. My father was very active with him. Back to the Stockade. I'm sorry, I get off track. I'm not sure I can add much more as far as my experience. Oh, how did it change? I think what happened was when they started the Stockade Association, I think that and the Heritage Foundation, I think that's really when they really realized what a gem that they had here. And I'm not sure that people still sometimes don't connect to it. We have the largest collection of historic homes in the country here. Most people don't know that. The Monitor, which was part of the Civil War, was the insides were designed here. The outside, which was the shell of the Monitor, was built over in Troy in the foundries, but the inside was all built here in Schenectady, and they lived right over on Green Street. The guys who invented the insides of the Monitor. So there were a lot of, and Steinmetz lived down on Washington Avenue. George Steinmetz, and of course Edison got off the train, and that's how he decided that he was going to build General Electric here, which was the Edison Works at one time. But I think over the years, I think people sort of realized, and having been in real estate for over 35 years, you really kind of figure it out that if one person fixes, then it makes people realize, well, maybe I should fix, maybe I should fix, maybe I should fix. And we're actually at a time right now where it's really quite good, because I would say that if you're going to take 100 homes, probably 85 of them have been redone, and maybe 15 need to be done. So on a percentage scale of the whole stockade, I would say probably about 85% of it has been restored. There's probably about 15% of the homes here that have not been restored, but slowly I think that's probably going to happen. You think it's more than that?
Oh no, I'm just saying slowly.
It's slowly happening, and a lot of it is financial. and money, because it does cost a lot to take care of these houses. It is really a commitment when you buy one of these houses. The interesting thing about them is, and I can almost tell because I was schooled by Susan Staffa, any house built after the 1860s, the basements were pretty much they used wood from the old fort. Because when they took down the fort, they saved all the wood, because it was quite high and the beams were really something. So if you go in some of these buildings that were built after 1860 and you look up at the ceiling in the basement, you'll see like a hand-hewn beam with notches in it. And you can tell that was something that was in that was part of the stockade, the actual stockade. Part of not necessarily the fort, but see, there was